Joining us now, perhaps the most full-throated critic the former president has on this subject among his Republican primary opponents, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who, of course, I should remind everyone, will be joining Anderson Monday night for a CNN town hall, which I will be eagerly watching. Governor Christie, thanks so much for joining us and popping in to give your reaction on this important day. Last night you said no one's above the law, but you wanted to wait and read the indictment before reacting, which, you know, frankly seems like a responsible thing to do. Now you've read it. What do you think?
Oh, Jake, look, for folks who may not remember this, I did this for 7 years as the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey, the 5th largest U.S. Attorney's office out of the 93 in the country. Brought 130 political corruption prosecutions against Republicans and Democrats and didn't lose one. So I know how this stuff works. And the fact is that these facts are devastating. You have a president who, according to the indictment, directed the packing of those boxes in terms of what to take, directed where they should go to Mar-a-Lago, directed where they went while they were inside Mar-a-Lago, directed them to move to Bedminster during the summer when he would spend his summers in New Jersey. And then when requests came, starting in May of 2021, informal requests, he continued to stonewall them and not return the documents. Then, when a subpoena came, asked his lawyers, Jake, whether or not we even have to respond to it. Do we have to play ball? And then tried to get them to lie on his behalf. And when he knew they wouldn't, and his own lawyer had to make recordings to protect himself, when he knew they wouldn't, he directed his folks to hide boxes from his own lawyer in order not to turn these documents over to the government. Look, people are going to argue about who should and who should not have been indicted and who should be tried. But let me say this. The bigger issue for our country is this the type of conduct that we want from someone who wants to be president of the United States? To take national security documents involving warfare and our nuclear program, to keep them in their home when they're not allowed to do so, exposing them to potentially being seen by any number of people, and then actually showing them to people, showing off. This is irresponsible conduct. And look, at the time when Hillary Clinton was not charged, I argued against that. I think she should have been charged. I think that was a mistake. And during the Russia investigation, I was one of the people who spoke out and said, I didn't think Donald Trump had anything to do with it. I was involved with the campaign, and I didn't think there was anything to the Russian collusion as it applied to Donald Trump. So I've spoken out against those things when I think they were wrong. But just because they were wrong doesn't justify the conduct that he engaged in. And I think we have to focus on the conduct, Jake. And the conduct is bad. And it is bad for anybody in this country to do it, but it's particularly awful for someone who has been president and who aspires to be president again.
So, as a former U.S. attorney, does this look like a case that you would theoretically have brought had you been assigned?
I don't know all the facts, Jake, but I'll tell you this. It's a very, very evidence-filled indictment. What you can tell as a trained person reading this is they have tape recordings, they have electronic text messages and emails, and that they have the testimony of dozens of people who were right around Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago and in Bedminster over time. Those are all the elements of the things you need to bring a case like this. And so what I would say is that it looks like these prosecutors and their partners at the FBI thoroughly investigated this, and it looks like the only two people who did not cooperate with the government are Donald Trump and Walt Nauta. And I think that's why they're on the wrong side of the V, as we say in the business, and have been charged in this case.
Republican officials, whether candidates or elected officials, seem to be falling into three groups. One is those who are just being quiet. That's most of them. Then there's those who are vociferously defending Donald Trump. And then there's a small group of you and Governor Asa Hutchinson and Mitt Romney and Adam Kinzinger. This afternoon, House Speaker McCarthy said that this indictment will disrupt the nation. He says that it calls into question equal justice for all. Congressman Andy Biggs says that we've reached a, quote, war phase. What do you make of the rhetoric And what do you make of the fact that you're in such a small group of people willing to call out this alleged lawlessness?
I think the group will get larger, Jake, as everyone gets an opportunity to absorb the facts. Look, I agree with Speaker McCarthy in this respect. The indictment will disrupt the nation. But let me ask you a question. Who's responsible for that? The conduct that Donald Trump engaged in was completely self-inflicted. In May or June or July or August of 2021, he could have just returned the documents. And in fact, if you look at the indictment, even the documents that he did return, subject to the subpoena in 2022, those documents, he wasn't charged on any of them. So even if he had given all the documents back in response to the subpoena, as he was legally required to do, we wouldn't be here today. So everyone wants to blame the prosecutors. And look, I think the prosecution, DOJ, is at fault for not charging Hillary Clinton. It's at fault for what happened in the Russia investigation because it undercut people's faith and confidence in the system. But each case has to be looked at on its own merits. And the facts that are laid out here are damning in terms of Donald Trump's conduct. And that's what I think we as a party should be looking at. Do we really believe that someone who engaged in this type of conduct is going to be the best person to put up against Joe Biden? That's the question we should be asking. Congress has the ability to have oversight over the Department of Justice, and I encourage them to do it vigorously and fairly and ask all the questions they need to ask of the leadership of the Department of Justice. That's what we should be doing. But what we should also be doing is holding to account people who are in positions of responsibility and saying, if you act badly, there has to be penalties for that. There has to be a cost to be paid. And he could have avoided all of this if he had just returned the documents at any point, if he hadn't taken them in the first place. But once he took them, if he had returned them at any time between January of 2021 and August of 2022, he wouldn't be here tonight and the country wouldn't be here. He has contributed mightily to subjecting the country to the pain that we're going to go through over the course of the next number of months because of what's going on.